second day of the IFPDA's Print Month programming. I am Jenny Gibbs, Executive Director of the IFPDA and the IFPDA Foundation. This is our first hybrid print month with online programs as well as in-person programming at the IFPDA Print Fair from October 27th through the 30th at the Javits Center in New York. Today we bring you Dr. Lisa Farrington and Tanikia Word with a conversation about the history of Black women of print and the portfolio continuum. We're presenting today's program as well as a panel conversation at the IFPDA Print Fair on October 28th with Kimberly Gant and current and former members of Black Women of Print in conjunction with the installation of the portfolio continuum at the Metropolitan Museum of Art and the Robert Wood Johnson Jr. Gallery. The portfolio will be going on view on October 13th and into next month, and I urge you to experience this work in person if you have the opportunity. Looking at prints on screen is okay, but experiencing them in person is always better. We're delighted to support our friends at the Met and the Prints and Drawings Department, who will also be presenting their annual Print Study Day next Wednesday, October 12th at 12 noon. The topics for next week's program range from late Gothic engravings with Dr. Joyce Zellem to Van Gogh's lithographs with Dr. Ashley Dunn. Our speakers today will be introduced by Jennifer Farrell. Jennifer is the curator at the Metropolitan Museum, responsible for modern and contemporary prints, illustrated books, and artists' books. She joined the department in 2014 after holding curatorial positions at the Yale University Art Gallery, the University of Virginia, and the Whitney Museum of American Art Independent Study Program. Before we begin, just a reminder that we are recording this program and it will be available online on the YouTube channel of the IFPDA, as well as our website. If you have questions, please type them into the Q&A box, which you'll find at the bottom of your screen. And with that, I turn the program over to my friend, Jennifer Farrell.
Thank you, Jenny, and I'm so excited to be here to introduce what should be a really fantastic panel from two prominent and very important voices. Dr. Lisa Farrington is an international leader in the field of African American art history, with scholarly expertise in race and gender, in visual culture, African American art, European modernism, and Haitian art. She has lectured widely and authored or co-authored more than 20 books, including the award-winning publications, African American Art, A Visual and Cultural History, and Creating Their Own Image, The History of African American Women Artists, both published by Oxford University Press. She has written widely on Faith Ringgold with publications including Faith Ringgold and Art on Fire, The Politics of Race and Sex in the Paintings of Faith Ringgold, Amos, and other African American women artists. Recently, her essay, Women's Work, Fabric and Feminism, was published in the exhibition catalog, Amos Color Odyssey. In 2020, she was appointed Associate Dean of the Division of Fine Arts in the College of Arts and Sciences at Howard University. She also serves as the Director of the Art Gallery and is presently also a Distinguished Professor Emeritus at the City University of New York. Among her many awards, Farrington has been awarded the Creative Capital Writers Award from the Andy Warhol Foundation Arts, the Spelman College, Atlanta University Endowed Chair in the Humanities, and a Ford Foundation Education Fellowship, as well as Lifetime Achievement Awards from the Faith Ringgold Anyone Can Fly Foundation and from Howard University's annual James A. Porter Colloquium. Tanikia Word is an artist, art educator, cultural arts organizer, and scholar. She creates multimedia visual art, paintings, drawings, prints, and book art. She was born in the Mississippi Delta, and those memories are rooted within her praxis. Coining the term everyday fantastical to describe her art, she utilizes portraiture, nature, material culture, and Black artistic cultural production, such as oratory and literature, to examine the depths of everyday Black women's spatialities, real, imagined, and lived practices. Word earned a BA in English and Afro-American Studies in 2006 from Howard University and studied painting under James Phillips of AfriCobra. She has an MA in Arts Management with a concentration in Visual Arts and Development from American University. She completed her doctoral program course load in May 2019 and is currently an urban education PhD dissertator with a specialization in critical race theory in art education. Word is based in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and is the owner and sole operator of Womanist Press Studio. She is also the founder of Black Women of Print, a collective created to promote the visibility of Black women printmakers and create an equitable future within the discipline of printmaking. In addition to providing support to and advancing work by contemporary printmakers, Black Women of Print promotes the history and work of Black women artists from earlier generations. In this spirit, Word proposed and curated Continuum, the extraordinary print portfolio published on the first anniversary of the founding of Black Women of Print. The prints in Continuum, made by current and former members, quote, pay homage and or reimagine, end quote, the legacy of Elizabeth Catlett, Betye Saar, Alison Saar, Margaret Burroughs, Amos, Wanda Ewing, and Betye Aon through subject and symbols. For this portfolio, Word also created a magnificent print, Starshine and Clay, in response to Allison Saar. In addition to Continuum, Word's powerful screen print, We Were There, We Are Here, We Are in the Future, is also in the collection of the Met and was recently on view. On October 13th, Continuum will be on view at the Met as part of the exhibition, The Power of Portraiture, selections from the Department of Drawings and Prints. I hope you will join us and see these incredible works on view, because as wonderful as photography is, it really does not do justice to these works. And I hope you enjoy today's conversation, which should be absolutely fascinating. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining Dr. Farrington and I. We'd like to start the presentation for you all now.
While we're waiting, hello, I'm happy to be here. I'm happy to see you, Tanekeya, since it's been a while since we've had a chance to chat together. So that's really nice. And I think I'll start by letting our audience know about the relationship between prints and politics. And that has nothing to do with the subject matter. Since the 1930s and probably before, the creation of prints has been associated with democracy and egalitarianism, in that before the 1960s or so, museums that had prints to show the public were not open for free, not accessible for free, and they weren't open in the evening hours after working class people were finished working and would have time to go to a museum. So the way to see artwork for the ordinary person was it was difficult to see the real thing until museums began to open later in the evening and have free days, which they still do today. So that's one issue about art, is that it used to be for the upper class only, which of course left minorities and lower income persons out of the loop. Now, prints themselves have been considered by intellectuals and by the art community as egalitarian, in that they are sold in multiples. They can be seen by more people than a single work of art. And they are less expensive, and therefore they are available to everyone. They are much less elitist than a single painting or a single sculpture. And Elizabeth Catlett understood that when she was working with the Talla Gráfica Popular in Mexico, which was a socialist communist group of artists who worked to support labor unions. They created things like posters and flyers and things that would help support the agendas of the worker. And she also understood, which was another reason why she focused on prints, as did Margaret Taylor Burroughs, because they shared this attitude that they came across during the 30s and 40s at the Southside Community Arts Center in Chicago, that prints were for everyone, and they were a wonderful way to reach the broadest possible public. So having said that, my historian out of the way, I would like to ask Tanekeya to talk to our audience about why you founded Tanekeya, Black Women in Print as a group, and then what prompted you, if I may ask two questions at once, what prompted you to create Continuum, the portfolio?
Okay, if you can go to the next slide. So I would like to first start off speaking about Bell Hooks because she is the foundation of my practice of care in which I founded Black Women of Print for. So I specifically look at a site of resistance and Black Women of Print being a site of resistance for Black women printmakers. Historically, African-American people believe that the construction of a home place, however fragile and tenuous, the slave hut, the wooden shack, and a radical dimension, one's home place was the one site where one could freely construct the issue of humanization, where one could resist. Black women resisted by making homes where all Black people could strive to be subject, not objects, where we could be affirmed in our minds and hearts despite poverty, hardship, and deprivation, where we could restore to ourselves the dignity denied to us on the outside in the public world. So that is the foundation of Black Women in Print. I wanted us to have a place where we can come together and support one another. Being that the discipline of printmaking, it is not as democratized as print should be. And we were not in the books and the art canon as we should. And this was something that we wanted to make sure that it stopped. So in order for that to happen, we had to lean on our foremothers' wisdom and to expand on that. So that was the premises for building Black Women of Print. And in regards to the portfolio, if we can have the next slide, please. And then the next slide. So Continuum, we decided to look at, well, I sat back and just thought about visual language for a while because I was introduced to visual language. I would say as a praxis at Howard University through James Phillips with Afrocopra, and he does amazing iconography that is African centered. And I recall the Adrinka Sankofa symbol because we talked about that a lot. And it's one of my favorite symbols within that specific cultural tribe. And it means it is not taboo to go back and fetch what you forgot. And I'm always thinking about that as people of the African diaspora, specifically as African Americans, where we were detached from certain things, but it was in our core memory and collective memory, and how we can go back and take those things and find those gaps and expand upon. So from there, I talked to the members of Black Women of Print and suggested Continuum and gave them the outline and the visual languages in which I felt that we should look at as the basis when we were choosing our specific foremothers who were in the print world that we can expand on. No one actually copied off of these amazing women. What we wanted to do is say, hey, I'm already working in this way. How did this come to me? How am I expanding that? And from there, we decided to choose which foremothers. And of course, some of us chose the same people, but then we had to say, okay, well, I'll take, this person, or I'll take that person, because there was so many to choose from. So that's kind of how it all started.
Wonderful. So let's go to your next slide. Oh, I did want to interject that Howard University has been such a powerful influence on so many of us. James Phillips is actually still teaching there, and he was an artist in residence when I was a student there in the 70s. So the longevity and the power and the influence of that institution is, to me, kind of miraculous. And Elizabeth Catlett went there, so there you go. Yeah. So we're looking now, tell us, Tanekeya, at one of Catlett's more famous pieces.
Yes, so this is an iconic piece from Elizabeth Catlett. And I like to say that when most people are thinking about Black women printmakers, the first person that comes to mind is Elizabeth Catlett. That is pretty much most people's introduction to Black women being in print. And the same process actually happened to members of Black women in print. So this piece was, I would say, the catalyst for a lot of the printmakers starting into that. I like to go into Delita Martin's work after this because she chose Elizabeth Catlett to look at a specific visual language, such as the contours, the bold contours, and expressive mark making of Catlett to evoke within her work because she works within that style as well.
And both of them also work with lino cut, yes?
Yes, Delita does a very amount of printmaking techniques, but for the portfolio, she used lino cut for the portfolio.
Wonderful. And the thing is that Catlett, of course, her most important subject was the Black woman. And she had these wonderful techniques that I think Delita may have absorbed. This, and also Elizabeth Catlett's first husband, Charles White, used a similar technique of the worm's eye view, which you're looking up at a worker or an ordinary person, in this case, a sharecropper, looking up from the ground gives that image a monumental feeling of greatness. And these kind of techniques that artists use are often not recognized by ordinary viewers. They know that the image feels monumental, feels important, but they don't realize necessarily how that's pulled off. But in this case, and in Delita's work, I think you find that.
Yes, so you will see that Delita also used that specific perspective when she made her piece. If we can go over to see Delita's awesome piece as well. Thank you. So she used that, if you can see that same stance, it's actually used within Delita's work. And then she decided to use more expressive bold contours, because if you look at Elizabeth Catlett's work, it's a bit of a precision with the expression. And then Delita has magnified that and kind of like broken that frame when she's doing the contours and to make it more expressionistic. Also, Delita uses the circle as symbol within her work, and she locates the moon as something that is indicative to womanhood. So she's also using that. You can see it on the collar as well, that she has the crescent moon as well as the circular whole moon. And then it's also in the background. And then she has hand stitching, which she calls tacking too, because it comes from the language of her grandmother, when her grandmother would ask her to go ahead and tack the quilts for her to get them started. So she brought that handwork back into it. You'll also see that she has the decorative paper, and she has a lot of pattern work within her specific visual language, because she likes to talk about the liminal space of veilscape, in which she creates those.
Tanekeya, say that word again. I didn't understand you. The subliminal space, is that what you said?
Liminal.
Oh,
liminal space, yes. So she looks at the liminal space, that in-between space, and she likes to speak about spirits as well as veilscape, the word that she uses for her particular pieces. And you can see all of that within this piece and more work that's in Delita's overall.
And another thing to point out when you were talking about the sewing element, the tacking element, is this idea of old idea of women's work, that if there was sewing and fabric involved, that's also historically, at least in this country, indicative of a strong female history.
Yes. So I love that she's juxtaposing, and there's other women, such as myself within the group as well, who juxtapose women's work with the supposedly man's work of printmaking.
Yeah. So
sorry. In the next, can we move over to Betye Saar's work? Return to Dreamtime is a piece that Jennifer Mack Watkins actually looked at for her piece. She loves that Betye Saar uses assemblage and lots of symbolism within the work, and that she has specific areas in which she talks about the stereotypes of Black folk, and how we can actually reimagine more possibilities, although there's oppression during that time. Is there anything you'd like to say, Dr. Farrington, about?
Well,
Betty
yeah,
Saar?
I just, of course, I'm a great fan of Betye Saar's and Allison Saar. But this print in particular fascinates me. It has, even though it's an intaglio and screen print, it still has the appearance of stitching and of quilting on it. And Betye Saar, of course, is very spiritual persona. And so you get this sense of, the universe and stars and sort of vortexes that represent eternity and ladders and crescent moons again. And so, and the snake form, which is normally considered phallic, but it's also a very important image in several religions, including several African religions, as a representation of healing and power and so forth.
And if we can go to the next slide, which shows Jennifer Mack Watkins' piece. Her piece is entitled Future Undetermined. During the time of her creating this print, she also worked with another member of the group, Leslie Dugood. She was pregnant during the time, and I think she was very close to her due date when she was making this, and it was with her son. So what she decided to look at were a few different things, symbolism being the core visual language for it. But she also looked at post-Reconstruction era, in which various ephemera was created that were pounded with racial slurs regarding the Black body. So she decided to have two different types of figures. All the figures are babies. One of them is silhouetted darker to think about the term of tar baby and the history of tar baby. Then she has the other pieces that are more outlined because Betye Saar, she loves the line and the drawings within her work. She also has this vortex in which Dr. Farrington really talked about, this space that is shown within the work. And then you'll also see within the layering of the opaque and transparent backgrounds with this mokuhanga and screen print that she has different text as well as math and science in the background to just talk about the use of education being super prominent and needed within the Black community for these children. And she's also an educator. She also has a target because during this time, and then to also think historically about how Black bodies are marked and targeted. And she has future undetermined because she has this view of how she wants to determine her children's future. But at the same time, she knows that because of the ways in which their body is marked, that it's also undetermined.
Yeah, and I notice also, Tanekeya, those are great observations, by the way. I notice also that they share some formal similarities, Mack, Watkins, and Saar, in their use of this blue, almost night sky environment to suggest something spiritual, something cosmic, maybe. And also the lack of a ground plane, that in both artists' works, the figures, the objects are sort of floating. There's no, there's no horizon line, no ground plane, no perspective in that traditional sense. And that I noticed years ago in doing some research on a quilt maker named Powers, was that there were many quilt top makers in Africa that completely ignored the ground plane, and those sort of templates for making quilts came over to the Americas with the slave trade, and we can see that in so many quilts. And so it's interesting to watch how this fabric idiom just reappears in the quote unquote fine art form of printmaking.
Yes. Wonderful. Then if we can go to the next slide, please. We have Elizabeth Catlett's wonderful friend, Margaret T.G. Burroughs. And we have this piece, which is actually a lithograph called Mother Africa. It is one of my favorites and also one of Latoya Hobbs' favorites. And Latoya decided to look at this iconic black and white portrait and to look at the texture, the use of texture in the foreground and backgrounds, and also to look at the contours and how the contours were created using just mark making. So if Dr. Farrington like to say anything about Burroughs, or should we go? Okay.
No, sure. Yeah, well, I mentioned a little bit earlier that Margaret Burroughs and Elizabeth Catlett were both working together for a period in the 40s at the Southside Community Arts Center, which was a WPA-sponsored center in Chicago. And that was, of course, during a period of the 30s when even the US government was greatly concerned with glorifying the working class and glorifying the worker and setting up these art centers all around the country, the South Side being one of the big ones, and then the largest being the one in New York, the Harlem Art Center. But so they shared in common this idea of the importance of every class, I'll put it that way. The other thing is, so you see that in this work, it's a kind of a beautiful representation of Black beauty in particular. And of course, I'm pretty sure Margaret used herself as a model back then, because it certainly looks a bit like her, but I'm just guessing. And then the other thing I wanted to point out was how sculptural the structure of the face is. Very powerful, three-dimensional, bold representation of the high cheekbones and the eyes and the nose and the lips. And that sculptural quality translates in Catlett's work to the fact that she actually created sculpture, and she had this really strong feeling for powerful three-dimensional angular and planar images. So it's really amazing.
And I'd like to talk about Latoya's work and her usage of, I always tell Latoya, she uses the everyday as heroic, whether in scale as well as the subject matter. If we can go to the next slide. Latoya decided to actually use a portrait of Margaret T.G. Burroughs for this specific work. She used the stippling technique, in which she also has the contouring of the face in certain ways where it's also sculptural. She also used a patterned background with the mark making on the foreground as well as the background, in which it also it actually blemished in with the hat and also the body as well. And within Latoya's work, she likes to always use portraiture. So I, like to call her a portraiture artist because it's always going to be representational within her work as well. When Latoya, she mainly works within relief printing when she's printing, and then she's also a painter. But the mark making and the carving of her matrix, she likes to excavate the different stereotypes that are placed upon the Black woman to actually balance that out with what we really are.
Thank you, Tanekeya. And let me ask you this, can you talk a little bit about how, in heaven's name, I being an art historian, not an artist, but it's amazing how Hobbs gets all of the different textures and nuances from a woodcut. How is that done?
Oh, she's magic, but no, seriously.
Because one would think that she was using more than one technique, but it's just stunning here.
Yeah, so Latoya actually only uses hand carving tools, so it's no Dremel or anything else. She specifically uses carving tools to have precision in her mark making. And so she does all of this by hand, no assistance but her own. Wow. Carving on wood as well as lino.
Mm-hmm. And I'm not sure, I'm sure many people in the audience understand how these techniques work, but for those who don't, we're talking about, tools that cut into wood.
Yes.
And you're without being able to necessarily see your image, you're cutting into wood and formulating an image by digging bits of wood out of the wood block. and then configuring multiple runs through the press to get the 3 different colors plus white. So it's just unbelievable technique.
Latoya actually prints by hand, unless it's a large scale. She has this wooden spoon that she's had for years, all through undergrad and grad school. And she actually prints very rudimentary
Wow.
by hand with that. And basically, this is like a carving tool. So like this is
Yeah, hold it a
small
little
carving tool.
hold it a little
So-
closer. Yeah.
So this is like small tools, and she uses mostly smaller tools because of the fine line and details. And it's like a wood block,
Mhm.
so she has to carve through the wood to make this.
I'm gonna jump on for a quick sec. I should have said at the beginning, Latoya is creating an amazing installation at the IFPDA Print Fair at the Javits. She's going to be showing one of her large scale wood cuts, as well as a series of portraits of the artists from Continuum. So
Wow.
see a lot of Latoya's work on view. And now I'm going to jump on.
Oh, yeah, but Jenny,
Yeah.
just remind everybody the dates of the print fair and where to find you.
October 27th to the 30th at the Javits Center in New York.
Thanks. It's going to be fantastic, I think.
Yeah, it's definitely gonna. I've seen some behind the scenes of it, and I'm going to tell you now, it belongs in the canon for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And there have been print print historically print studios. There were WPA studios. There was Bob Blackburn's print workshop in New York, and so it's nice to see you, Tanekeya, spearheading a woman-led group in printmaking. That's really wonderful.
Thank you so much. It means a lot coming from you.
So shall we move on to?
Yes.
Yeah.
So now we have Allison Saar, and I have such a love for Saar's work because I like to say that she lives in the fantastical. And high cotton was really important to me because being from the Mississippi Delta, actually having people who work the cotton fields, and a lot of people don't know this, but in the 90s, people were still working in cotton fields in the Mississippi Delta. My mother worked in the cotton fields before she migrated to Milwaukee, Wisconsin, so that we could have a better life. My peers, I have peers who are in their late 30s to early 40s. Instead of them going to work at like a restaurant or fast food chain, there were several pickup trucks that will come into the area, pick them up. They'd have their hats on, and actually they'd go to the cotton fields to pick cotton for their pay. So it does not go to antebellum slavery South for me. The lived experience of cotton picking is just within me from the 90s, as well as what my mother had to do before she migrated to Milwaukee to provide for her children. So when I saw high cotton, it just brought back so many memories and lived experiences for me. And so if you go into the next slide, you'll see.
Just if we could stay on Allison for just a minute. I just wanted to ask you about Allison and hair.
Oh, yeah.
Allison Saar, as is true of Emma Amos and other African-American artists, women artists, has done any number of sculptures and assemblages and prints about Black women's hair. And it's such a fabulous subject. So I just wanted to ask you to speak to that.
So coming from a matriarchal lineage, and my mother had 4 daughters, and I have a daughter, and I have a whole lot of hair from myself. Hair plays a major role in the ways in which we decide to walk about, in our lives. It is one of the things that we have had control over in spaces where we have felt that there were no control. We were able to have respect for ourselves and do those things, but also within the African diaspora. If you go back historically within Africa, people who actually did hair were like the high priestess, of Africa. They were the most sacred people. And when we think about that, we think about how Black hair can be coily, can stand up straight, it can do amazing magical things. And it's one of those living objects within us that is a connector as well. So when I'm thinking about hair, I'm thinking of possibility, because there is nothing that our hair can't do. So if we take on that power within ourselves, then what can we do? So I'm always thinking about possibilities and ways of seeing Black as a possibility.
Yeah, and also there's a political element to Black hair as well. I, having been alive in the 60s, I remember everybody got an afro right around 68, 69. And I went to Catholic school, and the nuns made tried to prevent several people from graduating unless they cut off their afros. That's how, that expression of Blackness and of Black beauty was considered militant at that time. And even in corporate America, there is still an attitude that if you wear your hair in cornrows, or you wear your hair in, in braids of some sort, or you wear your hair in one of the fantastical ways that Black people can wear their hair, that you're not welcome in the boardroom, and that is a real political issue. That suppression of self-expression is still today an issue. It's still very much alive. People judge you based on how you wear your hair.
Hence the Crown Act, and as well, even when I was at Howard.
You might want to explain to people what the Crown Act is. It's very recent.
Yes, it's basically stating that you cannot
it's an actual law.
Discriminate. It's a law. Is it being abided by versus that? That's a whole other story, but it's supposed to deter people from discriminating against another person based off of their hair. And I know some people would say, what, just based off your hair? Yes, it is absolutely true. All the time. Happens to me still to this day, because I chose to have my hair locked versus having it permed. And I think whatever way you want to do your hair, it's fine. But my personality is very resistant to the things that are unjust. So
I'm sorry to go on an aside, but this is my last aside. My brother was for over 30 years a high-level executive in an important insurance company, and he kept his hair cut, short. And I didn't realize how oppressive that must have been for him, because he retired last year and he's been wearing dreadlocks ever since. So Tanekeya, I'd love to talk about your work. So let's go to the next slide.
So my piece is called Starshine and Clay. And I have this love for Lucille Clifton. And I go to her anytime I need that extra push. And she has this poem, Won't You Celebrate With Me? And she talks about a liminal space in which Black women are building themselves without a mold, and that they are between this place called Starshine and Clay. And the works in which I create has womanism, which is something that was considered abstract. And it was considered abstract because the way in which Alice Walker talked about womanism was more of a language of prose versus academia, like Black feminist theory came out of. So it was like womanism was the 70s wild child compared to Black feminism, which would be the respectability, politics aspect of it. So those were the different types of sisters that you were thinking about when you were thinking about womanism. And autonomy and spirituality and harmonizing with nature were some of the prongs within womanism. And that's the theory in which I actually feel close to. And so within this piece, I decided to think about Lucille Clifton, to think about Allison Saar and the fantastical hair being the feminine prowess, also the side profile that Allison Saar is known to use within her work. I also thought about the land in which, in the Mississippi Delta that I come from, how I feel as close to home as possible. So I decided to do collage decorative custom paper that was marbleized to look like terrain. And then I did a linoleum cut to make something that was like more like an oceanography on the chest area. I did the fantastical hair and then made the face into a night sky and did a lunar moon as the earring. And then you would see that there's an arch and a halo. And when I think about Black women and what we have been up against and what we have made, I think of us as being sacred, just as people would think about the most holiest people within religion. So I wanted to combine all of those things. And if you actually see the work up close, there's a shimmer for the background paper, just talking about illuminating all of these aspects on the Black body.
Yeah, you can actually, the shimmer actually does come across, oddly enough, in the virtual world. And the arch, the placement of an arch, a golden arch, really conjures up ideas of cathedrals and Romanesque architecture and the idea of something truly sacred. Yeah, beautiful work. I love the colors.
Thank you so much. And you'll see that arches are in more works that I've been working on specifically for our next portfolio.
Great, great.
If we can go to the next piece, please. We have Bilquis Ayon, who is an Afro-Cuban artist, and her work is known to have the usage of calligraph, in which she takes a piece of wood or mat board and affixes various objects towards, including glue, to create textures. And then she collages those pieces together to make larger pieces. She specifically looks at a male religious culture. And when she's talking about the Akban people. And so she uses different iconography from that religious group of these male centers, and she talks about preservation, of that culture. And we have Stephanie Santana, who decided to use our foremother of Bilquis within the work that she created.
Oh, we need to see that slide, I think. Yeah.
Okay. And this is Stephanie Santana's piece. It's called Note to Our Higher Selves. And she has this unique way of pulling from her family archives. Her grandfather was an avid photographer of their family's culture. And she has taken on that for cultural preservation for her family, as well as the community of Black people. And this is a picture of her mother and her aunt, and it's called Note to Our Higher Selves. She also uses that negative space that you'll see in Bilquis's later work to lift up the spirit selves. And she also thinks about portals as well, and the different time shifts and when we, Jim Crow era versus, now, how those things are still the same, how things are different, how we've grown, how we've expanded. She also decided to create her own film for screen printing, in which she did the hand textures to mimic the calligraph, in which Bilquis created. She also did half-tone screen printing and the collaging of those things to create a specific narrative and visual language, which you'll see indicative in all of her work, whether she's doing monoprints for screen printing or actually as a textile artist. She used those same visual language and methods within the work.
And tell us a little about Wanda Ewing.
Yes, okay, so if we can go to the next slide, please. we have Wanda Ewing's work, and she loved to have this comical, powerful narrative about the Black body. Specifically within her Wallflower series, she took old wallpaper and she printed on that. And this is linoleum on found wallpaper, as stated before. She used this Black pinup figure with the afro, which was also, resistant. So we're seeing the natural hair. We're also seeing a pinup. So it's a nod to, this is the other side of respectability politics, whether it's with the hair, whether it's with the stance, with the body, with what we're doing. So she's having a conversation with the Black community as well as edit communities on the power of a Black woman's body and the choosing for herself.
And the comfort level with sexuality.
Yes. And she actually mentored a former Black woman, a Print member, Leslie Dugood. And Leslie Dugood, if we can go to the next slide, kept a piece of wallpaper from their time being spent together. And she photoshopped it and made it into a film in which she was able to create that background within the screen print. And then she decided to draw an expanded version of this Black pinup woman to overlay on it as an homage to her mentor, Wanda Ewing.
Beautiful.
And she juxtaposes the bright colors in the background, and in the foreground she has that iconic black and white. So that contrast says a lot about binaries as well.
And both prints have the women are wearing high heels, which means any number of things. For Allison Saar, I think she once said it means the feminine element. It means, of course, a traditionally streetwalker, but it also means, killer girl and powerful woman. And so there are just so many possibilities. And I love that freedom and the comfort level. And this reaction back against traditional stereotypes of Black female sexuality. This is Black female sexuality reinvented.
And if we can go to the next slide, this is Emma Amos, and this is the last work that is in the portfolio. I specifically looked at Santana because I know that this was one of Angela Pilgrim's favorite pieces by Emma Amos because of the juxtaposition of the three different women and just the look of ease and leisure. And so if you go to the next piece, in the next slide, this is Angela Pilgrim, tender-headed and heavy-handed. And she wants to talk about the different connotations of being tender-headed or heavy-handed, the tenderness and the heaviness that's also placed on the Black woman. And she wanted to show the relationship between Black women as well. You'll see that she also talked about hair. So
and tender-headed for I'm sure.
Oh yeah.
But that's what a young Black girl finds out she is when her mother first combs out her wild frizzy hair. Mine looks like it's not wild, but it took me a lot of time to get it straightened out there. But yanking at the hair and then causing your head to hurt. If you said ouch too many times, you were tender-headed.
And so she also has like the perm box. If you can look on the side, there's a perm box, although they're wearing natural hair. So, those are different things that they're talking about as well. She uses a decorative paper, which you'll actually see is an homage to Emma Amos's work, textile work, in which she has the borders for the textile.
That's true. Very, very, very good observation. And this idea of the perm box and the price and tender-headed, and this goes back to this idea that in order to fit in to American, a majority society, you had to straighten your hair. What I like is there's references to hair straightening, but nobody's hair is straightened in the print.
Yeah,
which is wonderful. I think we're out of time.
Yeah.
We have time for question and answer if Jenny wants to jump in.
Great. We do have some questions. Actually, the question for Tanekeya from Prudence Crowler was wondering, what is a risograph?
Oh, so for a Rezo graph, so I probably should have stated that that's what Angela's piece was. So it's basically like a Xerox machine that's from Asia, and it's kind of like screen printing. There are drums that you place inside, and it's called something called a master roll that goes over. It has like a mesh roll. There's soy and rice ink, depending on which brands that you have, and it actually rolls the image that you either scan or use from the computer. It basically rolls that image, burns the image, rolls the ink through, and then prints it out, like lots and lots of prints really fast. So kind of like a Xerox machine, but it can do screen print like things. But it's called a risograph.
Great. Tanekeya, we have a question from Laurel Garber. She's wondering if you could share a little bit more with us about the upcoming portfolio.
Yes, so we have a new portfolio which I curated. It will be available March to April of 2023. We have been working on it since June, so it actually is that in depth that members had to have 6 months to create it. Each member who will be a participant in the portfolio is doing a triptych. So that's a lot of print.
Fantastic.
And then there are going to also be a few more surprise elements within that. There will be 5 available. As always, we have enough for the members, and then we just make 5 additional sets because of how intricate they are. And yeah, so if you are interested in acquiring the portfolio, you can join our newsletter, or you can email us with the subject portfolio, and that way you'll get on the list before we announce it to the public. They won't last because we don't have that many. So I'm just going to be honest, we don't have that many. So if you're interested and would like to know more about it, then I'll be happy to chat with you all about it.
Fantastic. Hannah Sanders is wondering, Tanekeya, what the prints are behind you.
This is from a series that I've been working on since 2020 called Tender, a Sisterhood Anthem, and I am reimagining 100 Homes. I started it as something to talk about celebration and grief. I made 5 booklets for it. For sketchbooks, I have one of them here. So here's a sketchbook. So I have 100 reimagined homes within all of these, sketchbooks, in which I will have an artist book and portfolio that launches August of 2023 of my own. I'm also carving smaller blocks like this. So it will be 1,100 prints that I'm printing for that portfolio, which will be 11. And then I also carved, I'm doing 100 mono prints that I'm finishing from it. And then I also carved only 3 blocks like this. Like, so I carved these, and it's printed there. And then this one behind me also has detailed patchwork quilting in it. And then this is all hand embroidery to think about threading the African way of doing certain hairstyles. So this is all hand embroidered, all hand quilting. And then this is a split fountain rainbow roll for that. So yeah, I have a few of those, a few of the triptychs available. 4 triptychs available. All the singles are gone. I think I may only have 1 single left for that one.
Fantastic. We had a question for Tanekeya about advice for an emerging artist looking to redevelop themselves as a printmaker. And for that, I would also like to remind folks that we do have a Zoom coming up next week, next Tuesday, on starting a career in prints and printmaking, which is being presented by the Atlanta University Consortium.
Awesome.
So that will be Jade Spellman, our first intern from Spellman, who interned at Board Editions in Copenhagen this summer. So that'll be a good place to ask those questions too. But for Tanekeya, any advice on reimagining oneself as a printmaker?
Well, I'm a painter, drawer, and printmaker. So what I would say is make sure that you are understanding your visual language first. I always tell everyone to try to figure out exactly why you want to do a certain thing. And then there's so much in printmaking that you want to do. So maybe start off with something that is most interesting to you first, and then get great at that. And then if you want to move on to a different technique, then continue with that. And also make sure that you're going to look throughout history too, so that you can see how you can expand the narratives within printmaking, not copy, but expand.
Great. Dr. Farrington, there's a question here about the use of hair quilting, lunar imagery, and hair braiding and cornrows as references to the Underground Railroad and mapping. If you wanted to say a word about that, I think that may have come up during the Betye Saar slide.
That's very interesting. I mean, quilting is very closely related to the Underground Railroad, and there's a controversial Underground Railroad quilt code that includes moon images, star images as symbols of supposedly what direction the runaway slaves are supposed to go. But in terms of hair on the on the Underground Railroad quilt, that's a new one for me.
I think they're talking about the mapping of, well, there is myth. It has not been, written about, so we don't know. Yeah, so there was different types of rice, and also different fractal geometric signs that were placed in Black hair when it was cornrowed to present itself as a map. So those, again, because of the ways in which things were not, documented, and we have to rely on various African methodologies.
That's a problem with this. I'm sorry. This what's the word? The belief that written history is the only real history, and that oral history doesn't have value. But so oral history is referred to as a rumor or a myth or a legend.
Yes.
But that doesn't make it so.
Untrue. Yeah, it's just
thank you,
as we would like to say, ungeographic, because it's self-altering, and that's kind of what I talk about within the work. Is those things that you can feel and you have not verified, or seen.
Yeah, I think that's why the Underground Railroad quilt code is being debunked by some, because it is oral history, and not written.
And that's just to say one thing, that's something that we have to understand more within institutions as well as different education, that when we think about triangulation of data, that we have to also understand that there's a necessary aspect of qualitative research, specifically when you're dealing with various groups of people, especially African diaspora people, because the oratory is very significant.
Fantastic. Well, I think that is a good place to wrap up. We are at the 1 hour mark. Thank you so much, Dr. Farrington and Tanekeya and Jennifer, for this amazing talk. And I hope that we see everyone tomorrow. We have another program coming up tomorrow at 12 noon with Dr. Rena Hoisington, who's the curator of Old Master and 19th Century Prints at the National Gallery of Art. And she's going to be speaking about her publication, Aquatint, From Its Origins to Goya, which is the recipient of the 2022 IFPDA Foundation Book Award. So we hope to see you tomorrow. Thank you all for joining us. And this program, again, will be available online on the IFPDA website and our YouTube channel. And we hope to see everyone at the Javits at the end of the month. Thank you.
Thank you all. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.